We're going to hear from Azar Nafisi, the Iranian-American professor and author of many books, including the international phenomenon that is reading Lolita in Tehran, a memoir in books. First release in 2003, it sold more than 1.5 million copies worldwide. It's featured on the New York Times best-selling list for 117 weeks. It's also been translated into 32 languages, made into a film, which premiered too at the end of 2024, released worldwide last year, though, like the book, the film is banned in Iran. It's the story of the importance of literature in a time of crisis, and Azar's secret literature class she held on Thursdays with 7 selected female students. Here's an excerpt from the trailer.
Great books are supposed to make you feel uneasy and make you question what you take for granted.
Books like this can be a crime against the truth.
قربونت برم. همشون میدونن این کار غیر قانونی و خطرناکه.
Each one of you has shown me that you're dedicated to the study of literature. The literature they don't want us to read, the forbidden books. Let's see if reading Lolita here in Tehran will help us fight back.
I'm delighted to welcome Azar onto the programme tonight. Welcome to France 24, Azar. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for talking to me.
It is
Let me ask
wonderful to be with you.
Well, thank you. I want to ask you, because what we are 23 years from your book being released, it's retained a global appeal and doubtless even more so now. I went into an English bookstore on Rue de Rivoli in Paris last week. Right at the front, copies piled up in the windows. I've since been back. They got 1 copy left. And in the midst of this latest crisis, 2 weeks into the war, your story clearly is more important than ever, helping explain what life is like, was like under the regime. What do you make of that?
Well, it is wonderful to talk to you today. And I feel that, I was thinking about the war with Iraq and how Ayatollah Khomeini at that time said that this war has been a blessing for us. And this is how the Islamic regime looks at the world. I call it, I think that the Islamic regime is the Soviet Union of the Muslim world. Like Soviet Union, it has imperialistic ambitions. And like Soviet Union, it has an ideology. And it's an absolutist, a totalitarian ideology, which is why for them, for the regime, it is always good to be in some form of conflict. And the last thing I wanted to say about this is that these people cannot accept any form of democracy because they believe that they are the emissaries of God against the great Satan. And the West is the great Satan, and which is why the people of Iran turned to it and wanted them to protect them and to support them.
I think one thing you do, you tell the micro to tell us about, the macro, the huge events going on by looking into the small room. If your place all those years ago, the colour you bring in, the imagination you bring in. And I think to those outside, it's easy to kind of not understand the level of what you call the totalitarian state, and explain just one area, that this cultural clampdown that you lived in, essentially the Ministry of Culture and Islamic guidance, I think I'm right in saying they had to permit the works. Anything perceived as politically sensitive or against the values of the regime, always critical of it, was not permitted. Always, I think since then, edited. It could be bowdlerized as well. Basically, romance scenes changed to marriage proposals, etc. And I've heard there is still, all these years on, a so-called biblioclept culture. You have subversive sharing of books. What extent is it still the case now, Azar?
Well, it is very much the case. When I was leaving Iran, my mother kept, the last day I was leaving, my mother kept following me from one room to another and telling me, tell them tell them. She meant that when I come here, I will tell the people about how we live, the real Iran, not the fabricated one. And I feel right now that, again, imagination and ideas come to the rescue. For Iranian people, this war would, I mean, their war, I'm not talking about the war that is going on, their war with the regime is not just political, it is existential. Like any totalitarian system that comes to power, the first thing they do, they confiscate your history. They rewrite it, reconstruct it. They confiscate your cultural and social life. They confiscate your personal identity. So it is existential. I mean, we're fighting for our existence, not just for a regime change. And when I was living in Tehran, some people would say, literature and arts, what does that have to do with real life? Well, I tell them that if literature and life and the art have nothing much to offer to our reality, to how it will change, how they can help it, you tell me that why is it that men and women, like Salman Rushdie, for example, who only have their pen as their weapon, how is it that they are so dangerous to some of the most brutal and militant regimes in this world? How is it that the writers and poets and artists are perishing? Actually, in Iran, they are literally perishing as we speak. And for me, my struggle with the regime started with the veil. Not just the veil, but mandatory veil. I see in veil, not in the regime's attitude towards veil, is a political one. It uses it as a sign of triumph over a democratic culture that it doesn't believe in. And so that is why the veil becomes so important. It becomes a symbol. It becomes a symbol of an attitude that Iranian people have towards the regime. When I would not wear my hair properly or put a little bit of makeup, it was to tell this regime that you do not own me, that I can be independent even when you threatened to put me in jail and to kill me or whatever. That is the message of the Iranian people. And the fear that makes the Islamic Republic so savage against the people without the weapons, against the best minds in literature and ideas, it is scared of them because it is scared of truth. And truth, once you know it, you cannot be silent. And they have tried everything they could, but they could not silence the Iranian people. If I may just, you asked for an example, at the beginning of this revolution, the regime, one of the first things it did was to bring down the statues of the king and his family.
Yeah.
And then they went to take the names of some streets that were after the that were named after the Shah and his family, Then they started talking about taking down the statue of our epic poet, Ferdowsi, and to change the name of the street after the agnostic poet Khayyam. There, the Iranian people stood up. They said, no, you don't. You would not take down the statue of this man. And the regime had to retreat. And I loved it. The fact that they can bring down a king, but they can't touch a poet. And that was what my father kept reminding me of. He would say that this is an ancient country. It has been invaded many times. But what gives this culture, what gives this nation its identity, its continuity, is its poetry.
Truth, when you know it, cannot be silenced. I'll take that with me tonight. That quote is very powerful. You talk about Ferdowsi, you talk about epic poets, you talk about the best of literature. And clearly, I mentioned before, in a time of crisis right now, certainly here in Paris, reading Lolita in Tehran is flying off the shelves. People want to read, want to try to understand. So I wonder what you're reading right now. What are you reading to try to help make sense of these latest developments?
God, I'm reading so many different things. Actually, I'm going back to some of the books that I read in Iran. And one of the books that is on my bedside is Diderot's Jacques le Fataliste. I tried to teach that in Iran, but it has all sorts of obscene, quote unquote, things. So I took Xeroxes of the book to the class, and the next week when they came, I told them, please bring back the Xeroxes because this book is obscene and we can't teach it here. And I knew that most of them, not all maybe, but most of them would go and get a Xerox of it before giving it to me. Because whatever the regime would be against, people would automatically be for. So that is how I got them to understand Jacques Fataliste. But I'm reading a mix. So it is, I reread passages from our great poets, and I'm rereading 1001 Nights because I feel that the whole frame story of 1001 Nights, where a king gets goes crazy almost because he finds out that his queen is having an affair with a slave, and from then on he kills a virgin every night and kills them in the morning before they can harm him. Shahrazad comes and says, she was the Vazir's daughter, and she comes and says, I would like to marry the king. And at night when they slept together, she told the Shah that she wants to, every night she tells her little sister a story, and could she do it before she's killed? And she's allowed. The king listens to her story, and she leaves it unfinished. So for 1001 nights, the king listens to these stories, and her view of life changes. She finds out that not all queens are traitorous, and not all kings are generous. This is at the heart of literature and arts, curiosity about other and empathy, connecting to others.
When you talk about connecting to others, I'm minded of the fact that the speed of developments right now, how are you keeping up with what's happening, especially given the digital repression, the internet crackdown ongoing? Are you hearing voices of your loved ones, your close friends from inside Iran? Are you getting to hear what they're thinking right now?
Yes, for a long time we couldn't get in touch at all, but now through, I am in very limited. We have very brief messages to one very young friend who used to send me videos and photographs of Iranian youth dancing and singing. She just recently told me that their parents' house was there was a bomb close by, and their place was full of glass. All the windows were gone, and she talks about that. She talks about the acid rain, and one thing that I keep talking to her, and I wanted to mention to you, is that we are forgetting. We're talking about this war, but we're forgetting about the Iranian people. And one of the things that she was saying, it gives her ulcers and she can't sleep at nights, is the situation of the prisoners in Iran. Right now, as we speak, we have no news. They're completely shut down. And she was saying that because they have arrested so many people, they're starving some people in jails. So I was hoping that alongside of whatever else is going on, we both acknowledge the Iranian people and tell them that they're not forgotten. Because this regime wants you to think that the world has given up on us, that it doesn't care. And that is what I hope would happen.
We're looking, I mean, when we're hearing about people inside, the information we get through and our teams are trying to hear, we're hearing of the door-to-door raids, the rooftop patrols going on to seize Starlink satellite equipment. Azar, we're hearing the amount of pressure on people who probably are terrified of getting information out. And given your experience of the suppression in the past, it's not going to be a shock to you, I'm sure. But I wonder how this compares now. Now we have the presence of social media and more ways to communicate. It clearly connects, to the youth. Our older generations being reached in the same way. I just wonder the information coming out and whether you're thinking that's making a difference. And given you said to me, actually, is that voice being heard? Sounds like you're questioning that right now.
Yes, and I can't understand how the world can sit and watch. I think people thought this war will end early and we will get our freedom. Well, that has not happened. What has happened instead is that Iranian people who had started this amazing revolution, the woman, life, freedom, coming into the streets, knowing that they might not be able to return, and yet coming into the streets and singing and dancing, covering the sounds of bullets with their singing. And the regime, no matter what it does, it can kill the leaders of a political organization. It can open fire on men and women. But how can the regime contain thousands upon thousands of people who come into the streets and chant and shout and bring joy to this dismal, deadly environment that the regime has created for them?
And this environment right now, there's still no overt sign of, that another uprising is happening. And when you hear President Trump, when you hear Prime Minister Netanyahu saying, rise up to the people, this is your moment, we will help you, but you need to do the rest, what goes through your mind?
I believe that it is the Iranian people who should have the last say. Um, I um, I understand people who are so frustrated, have become so hopeless, seeing all this killing going on, that they would want any form of attempts to support the Iranian people. I understand that, but a war needs to have a strategy. You can't come and say one thing today and then another thing tomorrow. I rather focus on the people. Though they are the ones who are paying for it and paying very heavily.
One person that you mention, and I think you've spoken about since within reading Lolita in Tehran, and there are literally themes in each chapter. I think that's probably why there are so many parallels to the Iranian regime. We can see in Lolita the abuse of power, the loss of identity. You go on with the connections with Gatsby, idealism versus reality, Daisy Miller, Henry James, and one of your students, Razia, who loved Henry James. One of the things you've said about her is you don't want her story to be forgotten. She was executed.
Yes, thank you for mentioning her. I was just thinking, can I do that? Can I talk about Razia? Do you want me to say something about her?
Yes.
Well, when I first went to Iran, I was also teaching at a small girls' college. And this girl, Razia, was one of my students in the class I was teaching fiction, American fiction. And she was practicing quote-unquote Muslim. She was very poor. Her mother was a cleaning lady and her father was dead. And but she was very smart, very intelligent, very serious. And she fell in love with Henry James. And she would tell me that this guy has been able to portray women who are so independent. And she said, these women are prepared to give up their happiness, but do the right thing. So it became a habit between Razia and I, where after class we would both walk together towards the gate and talk about these things. At the end of that term, I left the university and Razia sort of disappeared until a few years later, another student of mine came to visit me and she told me that she was in a cell with another student of mine, Razia, and they were having so much fun. She talking of Henry James and Mahtab, this other girl talking of Scott Fitzgerald. You know, this is how we connect as human beings, because everything that we say about difference will end up in what we have in common, how we connect to the world. When my students, when Iranian people were deprived of their connection to the world, they connected to it through their golden ambassadors, through the films, through the music, through the fiction. And maybe people in democracies should do the same in relation to countries like Iran or Afghanistan or Ukraine.
Your work, Azar, is still banned in Iran. Do you think of a time, do you hope for a time in your lifetime where you can read Reading Lolita in Tehran?
Yes, definitely. I dream of that. If I can read Lolita in Tehran, it means that so many things have changed. May I say something about how important it is for people in democracies understand that supporting people in Iran or Sudan or Ukraine is not philanthropy. It is not doing good for them. It is also good for the West. It is good for democracy. At the end of reading Lolita in Tehran, I brought a quotation from Saul Bellow. He said that Stalin is obvious, he's brutal, he's horrible. But in democracies, what threatens us is our sleeping consciousness and our atrophy of feeling. And he asked those who have survived the ordeal of Holocaust, how will they survive the ordeal of freedom? We had forgotten in democracies that freedom is an ordeal. It needs to be nurtured. We need to pay the price. We need to protect it. We in the West forgot, and people in Iran are here to remind you.
One more thought for now. It's been really lovely to talk to you tonight, Azar. 11 years ago, you probably don't remember this, but on Reddit, they have a forum called AMA, Ask Me Anything. And it kind of went mad at the time because you went on it and said, this is me, I'm ready to take your questions. And one question that struck me, long thread that you replied to, was about, for children in difficult times, trying to understand what's going on in the world, what would you recommend to them? What gift would you get them in the form of a book? And I think at the time you pointed to Ferdowsi, you pointed to Scheherazade and 1001 Nights. You also pointed to Alice in Wonderland as well. Tell me now, in this crisis, in this war, Iranian children, others trying to understand what's going on, what gift, does that change? What would you gift them in terms of a book to understand?
Well, actually, the same books. We can add Charlotte's Web and Little Prince, from which I constantly bring quotes, and Book of Kings, the mythology, Iran's mythology, beautiful stories.
Really nice moment to end on. Lovely to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much for your time today, Azar. It's been fantastic hearing your thoughts.
Thank you for your search of the truth. Thank you.
Lovely to talk to you. Thank you. Azar Nafisi, Iranian-American professor, author of many books, most recently Read Dangerously, The Subversive Power of Literature in Troubled Times. And as we've been talking about, as you can see here, the international phenomenon that is reading Lolita in Tehran.